So, welcome everybody as you file into the room. We're starting now, and we have a dozen or so colleagues that are likely to join us in the next 3-4 minutes. Thank you, Michelle High, Managing Editor. I'm Jeff Gedman with American Purpose. Here's the book. I'll hold it up. Michelle, you can hold it up. You can do a better job than I with these Zoom cameras and screens. The book is brand new. It's titled Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times. It's by our guest of honor, Azar Nafisi. You have her bio. Many of you know her personally, and I can only tell you it's a wonderful book. It's a fabulous read. It's so clear and engaging, Azar, your style of writing. You pick it up and it's truly hard to put down. And I admire you, your work, and this work for many reasons, including the way you grapple with things. You don't reach conclusions easily. I would describe you as someone who is highly, highly principled and with a compass, navigating troubled waters, if you will, but it's timely and it's fabulous. Azar, welcome and congratulations on the book. And you and I agreed that we would start with a conversation, me asking you a couple or so questions. You will tell us anything you want about the writing of the book and the book, but as soon as possible, we want to open up to the colleagues in the gallery. So if that suits everybody and our guest of honor, Azar, I'd like to start, Azar, and ask you a little bit about the origins of the book. And we learned very early on that during your entire life, you have written and received letters from your father, now deceased. Can you tell us a little bit about this background and why this background is important to this book?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. As I was telling Jeff, this is a place I feel so much at home, but I know that it will constantly make me question myself and question the world. So I very much look forward to this conversation. Yes, this book is addressed through letters to my father. And ever since I remember, we were in a sort of communication that my father created for us through telling stories. I was about 3.5, 4 years old when every night he would tell me a story, and he was very democratic in telling those stories. One night we would go to our epic poet Ferdowsi and learn about Persian mythology and early history. The next night we would fly to France with The Little Prince. The next night to Britain with Alice in Wonderland, to Denmark with Little Match Girl, to US with Charlotte's Web. And I learned from that early childhood that I can stay in my little room in Tehran and the whole world will come to me through storytelling. Later on, this storytelling became a means of communication between my father and I. Like, for example, whenever he was angry at me or he wanted to reproach me, he wouldn't just say, "I'm mad at you." He would say, there was this guy who had a daughter whom he loved so much, but she, yada, yada, yada. And so I learned to communicate with him through stories. And he also wrote to me. I was 4 years old. I still have that notebook, the diary he wrote, addressed to me. And when he was studying in US, I was 6 years old, and we would exchange notes and letters. And this letter writing and conversations continued right until he died. And so I could find no one more fit to tell my stories to. All his life, he told me stories. Now it was my turn to tell him my stories.
Azar, thank you. I want to continue with a biographical note because, well, it's important in a number of ways. Again, early on, you note that you were just 13 years old when you were sent to England for school. That was in 1963. Can you tell us what happened in Tehran and why it was that you were sent to England at that time?
Well, in Tehran, at that time, a lot of parents would send their children abroad to finish their studies. And my father told me that he wanted me to see the world and to not just through stories, but in reality, to see the world and to experience something different and to also stand on my own feet. Because once I left Iran, I was on completely strange terrain, alien terrain. And it was very difficult for me. It was my first sense of exile and my realization that reality, your home, people that you're closest to can all be taken away from you at the drop of an eyelid. And but from that age, I learned that I need a portable world, a world that I can take with me wherever I go, and it would not be limited by realities of my life. And so I took 2 books with me by our classical poets, Hafiz and Rumi, and another book by a feminist poet whom I loved and still love very much. So I felt that I'm taking the best of Iran with me, that part of Iran will always be with me no matter where I go. And I made a home in England and later in United States through its fiction and poetry, through Auden, through Dickens, through Smollett and Sterne and Austen, and Melville and Hawthorne and Ralph Ellison and later on Toni Morrison. So all of these became my relatives, my cousins and siblings, and I felt at home in that portable home, no matter where I went.
Azar, thank you very much. I'll just ask perhaps 2 more because I don't want to stand between you and the wider audience here. Azar, you say early on in the book, again, that your interest here is not about literature of resistance, but literature as resistance. And that goes to the purpose of the book and the connective thread throughout the book. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
There are 2 points about literature that become important. One is that literature is a way of, especially fiction, is a way of both discovering and questioning. So, Margaret Atwood, they asked her, how does she write? She said, I guess there are voices from distant villages beckoning to me. There is a bloody cleaver in the middle of the living room. And I ask myself, what's that bloody cleaver doing there? It needs to be investigated. So the act of writing and the act of reading should be not an act that we talk about things we already know, but it should be a journey of discovery about things we don't know. Imaginative knowledge is a way of relating to the world, perceiving the world, and changing the world. So at the heart of fiction are these great questions that question not just the world, but ourselves. And that way they become dangerous. They are also about curiosity. I mean, the whole idea of literature and science is based on this urge in human beings for knowledge, to know what we don't know, to understand those we do not, we have had no connections with, to connect. And as Nabokov says, curiosity is insubordination in its purest form. Good fiction is curious. It comes out of itself. It doesn't, like literature of resistance, it doesn't impose a message. It allows the reader to get under the skin of each character and make his or her own decisions. And through curiosity, we gain empathy and connect to others. Literature is about the other, always about the other, even the other, the stranger within you. The last thing I want to say is that literature as resistance is important because it is in search of truth. And truth is always a way of resisting the lies that totalitarian mindsets impose on us. It is a constant struggle and challenging those lies. And so truth in itself, in and of itself, becomes dangerous. And those of us who read, not just those of us who write, once we know the truth, we are involved. We cannot remain silent. And if we remain silent, then that means that we have, in fact, become complicit in the crimes that we are even against.
Azar, thank you. I'm looking at the book right now, and in my copy, I'm at page 155. It's the fifth letter, and it involves, in part, James Baldwin, a longtime interest of yours. You write, I feel like writing a letter of introduction to both of you. James Baldwin, meet my father. Ahmed, father, meet James. You go on to tell the story of how your father went on a job-related trip to Germany for 3 months. He studied German. He practiced by speaking German to you, you say. And then you say, but I believe that no place mesmerized you, speaking to your father, as much as America did. I'm thinking of all the discussions you and I have had about the United States, especially the problem of race in this country. Can you talk to us a little bit about race in this country, the conversations that you had with your father, and of course, this chapter that everybody will have read or will read?
Yes, he was mesmerized by the United States. Of course, he spent more time here than he did in other parts of the world. So that could be also one reason. And at the end of the book, in the appendix, I have an open letter he wrote to Lyndon Johnson after Johnson talked about his great society. Now, my father was mesmerized both by the immense freedom that people had in this country, especially freedom of expression, and the prosperity of the country, but also the amazing poverty and the segregationist aspect of America. He couldn't literally as a human being tolerate it. It shows in the letter he writes to Lyndon Johnson and in the quotations I bring from him. But throughout our discussions, he would tell me how amazed he is. And later on, I discovered the same thing that he was saying. During my student years, I was very much against America. So, but he always told me that I should see the complexity, the contradictions within the society, and not seeing the contradictions, you cannot solve them. With Baldwin, I never cease to be amazed by how, despite the fact that he hates, obviously he hates racism, and he was very active in the civil rights movement, and he wrote about it. But as a writer, he sees himself as a witness. And as a witness, his duty is to write the truth. Baldwin is more afraid of the hatred within him than of the hatred that is spewed at him from the outside. He doesn't want to become like his enemy. That is at the heart of it. Our enemy conquers us in two ways. One, by physically eliminating us, and two, by making us empty of our own principles and identities and make us become like him. I have an example. Am I talking too much, Jeff?
No, perfect. I'm taking notes, by the way, but no, not at all.
Please tell me to be quiet. As
No, please.
Because I was going to talk about, say something about the war in Ukraine and how we deal so differently with those we call our enemies. And I believe that the way we treat our enemies is as much important as the way we define our allies. It defines us, how we treat our enemies. Now, in Ukraine, Putin kills everyone, innocent civilians, children, anyone that comes in their way or not come in their way. They just assault, constant assault. Now, how does Ukraine respond to this? Of course, they defend themselves. They're always on the defensive. But they decide that they should get in touch with the Russian mothers and tell them to come and collect their sons. That is how they treat their enemy. They don't become the enemy. They keep their identity. I remember, I write about it in the book, an anecdote about Nancy Pelosi, when Trump called her all sorts of names, crazy Nancy and this and that, and she turned around and said, I pray for him. Now, how was he gonna respond to that? She refused to enter his domain. And she was much more effective when she refused to enter his domain than when she would respond to him in kind. So we never respond in kind.
So, Azar, thank you. One more on my side, promise that's it for me for now. I just can't resist. You have a foot in at least two different worlds, in English language in America, in Persian in Iran, and you experience things with, I would say, a very wide and critical lens. And I would like to suggest that where you grew up and the experience of your family and your father in Iranian politics was, if not defining, very influential in your life. Here comes the question, and it's relevant to the book. When you're looking today at the challenges to liberal democracy, or let's say the attacks on free speech, or let's say the ability to protect free speech with a culture of restraint and responsibility, that's another theme of your book. How do you see things right now in our development on the, I will say for shorthand purposes, the Trump national conservative right and the woke progressive left? What do you think is marginal and goes away in time? And what do you think is dangerous and what keeps you awake at night?
Well, everyone knows that we're living in a time of crisis, deep crisis and deep divisions. And crisis is always both good and bad. I mean, it is terrible, these two extremes on right and left. It is terrible what it's doing to the concept of democracy in this country. But time of crisis are also times of enlightenment, if we want to be enlightened, because extremes always bring to the foreground what the problems are. It will all depend upon how we treat these problems. Do we find the right way to confront them, or do we not? Do we give in to them? Right now, we have a culture. One thing I noticed when I returned to United States was that it has become a culture where it depends very much on comfort. You know, you notice how people on both sides keep talking about, I'm not comfortable with this, or this is disturbing. Well, you know, if fiction is disturbing and we need freedom of expression, we don't need freedom of expression. We're going to neglect it because we don't want to become uncomfortable. How are we going to live? Because life is uncomfortable. Life is disturbing in many ways. So we have to face our discomforts, and we have to stop eliminating them rather than standing up to them. And pain, which is what Baldwin talked about. He said, maybe we hate so much because we want to forget pain. And I think that if we stand up to our pain and our discomfort, there is a great deal of hope for us. There will be a resurgence, and these two extremes will become marginalized. But it's up to us. We could definitely go the other way, as we did in the elections 2016.
Azar, thank you. The floor is open. And I see Joanne first, and we'll just go around. And Joanne, I and most people know who you are, but in each case, if I may ask you to identify yourself, and Joanne Needham Ackerman, you have the floor.
Hi, Jeff and Azar. And for those who haven't read the book, it's really a great moving book, and I've had the pleasure of having discussions with Azar about it. My question, Azar, is right now, and this question was asked of me, so I think it's interesting to think about, what book or books would you recommend, or are you reading in this very fraught time, and especially in this time of the last few weeks with the Ukrainian-Russia crisis? Are there any books that you take your cup of coffee out on the deck and just read to, get your own mind settled?
Well, Joanne, it's so lovely to see you again. And I really did benefit from your comments and discussions about this book. Joanne's own book, Pen Journeys, her memoir of this amazing organization, Pen, I loved writing it, rewriting it. I loved reading it. And I recommend it to everyone, especially during these times. It's very timely. I keep thinking that I want to read books by Ukrainians, and I'm ashamed of myself because I never knew any new Ukrainian authors. I am still in the mode of dealing with this book. I mean, living in the world of this book. And I was thinking the other day about the books I had chosen for this book, which I didn't use. Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men, Nathaniel West's A Cool Million, which reminds me of Trump so much, and The Day of Locust, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's The Autumn of the Patriarch, the Autumn of the, not patriarch, of the dictator. I'm sorry, I forgot the title, and his 100 Years of Solitude. So these were some of the books that came to my mind because I became very interested in mindsets. What we're dealing with is a totalitarian mindsets. And I wanted to understand that mindset in its different forms. And each of these novels offers it in a different form.
So thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Azar. Here is the book. This is Joanne's book. We hosted her on February 22nd, and the video is in chat. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Joanne. Who would like to be next with a question or comment? And if I don't, Sue, forgive I'm using first name basis. Please call me Jeff. Hope that's okay. Sue from California, please join us. You have the floor.
That's fine. You can call me and everybody, as far as I'm concerned, first name basis. And Azar, I just am in awe of your work and your life. I appreciate so much your making yourself available to us. I'm not familiar with this group, but I have been working a long time. I heard you on an interview that was played on Pacifica Radio.
Oh, yes.
You were extraordinarily powerful, and I was driving, which is oftentimes when I listen. I wanted to take notes, just like Jeff and probably other people. Very powerful. What struck me when I heard you, that I had to kind of stop in my tracks, is the question that you posed of what it is about, and I don't remember the quote, what it is about writers or the written word that scares so many powerful men. These people are in power with tanks and armies and money and contacts, and still they wanted to go out and kill writers or ban books or burn them now. And that level of fear struck me deeply because my work has been very involved in communication, whether it's broadcast journalism or writing, or I work in the Communications Coordination Committee for the United Nations. I've been so long now, I'm advisor, and I use this a lot because what I see lacking so much is our societies that do not encourage the empowerment of the individual. We tear others apart. We even make a joke about the 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
I know I'm a bit all over the map right now without a pointed question, probably because you spark so much interest in me. I cannot wait to get your book and to have further dialogue and with you, in the sense that our work as human beings, as a humanist society, needs to empower the courage and the ability of the individual to know the kind of education that you received from your father, this personal belief that somebody believes in you, that you can, in fact, overcome and transform everything. And the problem is truly a gift. We don't see that. We see the fear. The strategy of fear is extraordinarily powerful. I don't want to take all your time. All I can say is I would like to somehow find a way to be in touch with you and continue. I have friends in Iran that I work with. It's called the Women for Cultural Wisdom. Is run by an Iranian woman, Dr. Sonia Gami Hashimi. And nonetheless, what you're doing is an extraordinary window. Sometimes it's the garden path that we take around instead of going into the front door. You do go into the front door often, but I believe you reach people through that side way where they're available to receive you. I'm so sorry, I'm rambling.
Oh.
I appreciate you beyond words, and I will order your book. I went to order it already and read it. Thank you so much for making yourself available and for what you're doing. And please, you're never talking too much. You have much to say. Form your statements in such a creative way that inspires our own curiosity to think and to see through the issues that are in front of us. I understand and I appreciate you, and I'll take my time off, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful listening to you, and there's so many points that I would like to have a conversation about. This is the great thing about books. They connect you to people you should be connected to, not people that you meet at a party or at your job. Or it is about passion, about people who share the same passion. I'd like to address just two of your comments very briefly. One is it is all about the individual and how they are educated to become independent minded. We don't, fiction, imagination, and ideas do not make policies, but they help create the mindset that makes it. So that is why education is so important, and that is why education is in danger today so much. Our schools are becoming more and more emptied of the love of knowledge, which is what James Baldwin used to say: ignorance allied with power is the worst enemy of justice. So that is what. And the second thing was about the question you said, that why do people, men with tanks and all sorts of latest weapons and all the power that they have, what is it that makes them so scared of a man or a woman with a pen that they want to eliminate them physically, that they have been eliminating them physically all around the world, although their work remains? This shows that they do not use violence out of a position of strength. If you are in a position of strength, you don't need to use violence. They use violence because they are afraid, and because they are afraid of truth. And that is why one of our greatest challenges today is standing up to the lies and finding creative ways of defeating the lies.
So, Azar, thank you very much. And Sue, that was really good. Come again, please. That was very helpful. Thank you. Could we turn now to you, Amir? You've waited patiently. You have the floor. Amir, can you hear me? I think you had a question, and I'm happy to call on you right now. Go ahead.
Hi, my
Hi.
name is Amir. I'm from Iran. I called from Iran, especially.
Oh,
And yeah, and nice to see you. I have a question, a really fast and quick question. Have you ever think to publish this book in Iran or translate it in Iran? Have you ever talked to somebody? Because I think it's really can help to Iranian community to know you better in better situations. And I want to know, have you ever think about it?
I have thought about it a great deal, and to tell you the truth, it breaks my heart that my books are translated to other languages, but not to Persian. I have been busy writing, and I haven't had time to translate my own books, but I don't think I'm a good translator either. I mean, I wanted a great translator for it. A book publisher, Iranian, contacted me, and I said that I waive the money part. I won't get the money, but I want to have a say in whom they choose as translator. And I never heard from them again. And I know that Reading Lolita has been translated in little book groups, and my friends tell me that the translations are terrible. But I have to give it serious thought after this book, because I want to connect to my people.
Yes, of course. And I ask it because of that, because you are a voice of part of Iran, and you can understand in a better way in your country.
Yeah.
And because of that, I ask this, and I think we can translate it in Persian and keep it in our country for our readers, because it's going to be really awesome. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of this very important mission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amir, and great to see you. And Azar, thank you. May I ask, when you say Reading Lolita, translated, discussed in small book groups, and you've said that the translations are not good or they're bad, does this mean poor quality translation, or does this mean political manipulation and mischief on the part of the authorities?
No, I think these are books that book groups that authorities won't approve of. I think it is mainly the fact that the translation, the quality is poor. At least that is what I heard from friends. I myself have directly no connection to any of them.
Okay. And before we continue, Azar, when was the last time you were in Iran?
I left Iran in 1997 and I haven't been back since.
Okay. And Amir, if I may ask, you're in North Tehran, is that right?
Can you ask your question again?
I just wanted to ask, if I may, you're in North Tehran, is that right? Do I recall that correctly?
Yeah, I live in Tehran. Right now I live in Tehran and I called from Tehran, yeah.
Okay. And Amir, have you been to the United States yet?
No.
Well, you too, we have to fix these things, okay? And we'll get you here. And, you know, Azar, we're aspirational, you know, about a situation that would allow your return. Azar, go ahead before we go to the next question.
I would like to remain in touch if possible. Please write me if you feel like.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. We can keep our connection. I have a lot of questions from you because I really want to know what exactly happened to you and what we can do for showing you to our Iranian readers. And of course, we're going to keep.
I will be in touch through American Purpose. I will ask them for your information and you can ask them for my information.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So brilliant, you two. Thank you. Who would like to be next with a question or a comment? And Michelle, if I'm missing anybody, please.
I love comments.
Michelle?
I was speaking with Azar a little bit before the event, and I just love this line and this idea about the importance of fiction to being connected and rooted in reality. And I just thought you might be able to expand on that for the audience.
Yeah, Michelle and I had a great talk with before the meeting, and we were talking about the way virtual reality has taken over our lives, which is something very obvious. And it has its good points. As long as its role is to complement our reality and not overtake. What we see now is that it is overtaking reality. So that our iPhones become extensions of our bodies. You know, we carry them everywhere we go. And by the way, Ray Bradbury, some decades ago, was worrying about this issue and wrote about it. I have a quote from him in my book. And I was thinking that about the saying, first they kill people, no, first they burn books, then they kill people. That always censorship and banning of the books becomes an assault, not just on imagination and ideas, but an assault on reality. If we cannot tolerate books that come out of reality, how can we tolerate reality itself? And you know, and it is important for us as human beings to be in touch with our environment, to awaken our senses, you know, the sense of touch, smell, taste. All of this is awakened through our contact with our environment. And that environment is becoming smaller and smaller. And that really frightens me a great deal. You know, Saul Bellow used to talk about the fact that in Soviet Union, Russia's violence was naked. We could all understand how they destroyed people. He said what is a threat to the West is our atrophy of feeling and our sleeping consciousness. And I feel that this is what happens when we forget reality and imagination and relies only on virtual reality.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Azar. I think the original quote I know is back in the day, a student of German literature, Heinrich Heine in 1822, a century early, said that when they start with the burning of books, the burning of people follows. That's enshrined in Berlin today. You can see it there. It's stunning, and we continue to visit these things. Who else and what else? And Michelle, anybody I'm missing right now? The floor is still open. And Azar, while people are thinking, we still have about 10 minutes left, and I'm selfish on behalf of the group. We're not letting you go soon, or not yet, I should say. Azar, any early reactions to the book that you can share with us? And I'm curious about friends, fans, and praise. You have that here in this room right now, but any pushback, any reluctance, any criticism from this or that circle? Anybody who's troubled by the ideas you advance? Maybe it's too early.
It is too early, but it will come, I'm sure. I'm waiting for them to come. But right now, I have had mainly the most positive part of it is not when people tell me they like the book, it is the kind of conversation they create around it. That is a compliment, rather than people saying, oh, what a wonderful book.
Azar, you noted some minutes ago, James Baldwin and the link he makes between hate and the avoidance of pain. And I can't put my finger on it right now, but in one of the chapters, the Baldwin chapter, you talk about how in some cases, if memory serves, we've created classrooms intent on avoiding confrontation. And
Yeah.
I think you've advocated that responsible, decent, honorable confrontation, wrestling with different ideas, of course, the theme of this book, with the other is really fundamental. Could you say a little bit more about that?
You know, I can't understand what kind of education eliminates the confrontation with ideas. You know, I mean, education is, Mark Twain used to say that education is a process of unlearning what you have learned. So we go to school in order to be confronted, in order to be disturbed, in order to be questioned, and in order to question and confront and disturb. That is how we create individuals who are independent-minded. How are we going to vote if we cannot practice our independence of mind? Be able to decide on by ourselves rather than follow the dictates of someone else. The simple basic act of voting needs both knowledge as well as a mindset that is open, a mindset that doesn't go by its own prejudices. The good old liberal education has served us well. There could be changes to it, but basically we need to go back to our love of knowledge without prejudice.
Joanne?
Well, if I can take the pleasure and privilege of speaking twice then. Azar and I have talked about this together, but what's so important in any society is the narrative that we live in and that we believe. And so when somebody asks why would governments with their planes and their bombs and their armies be so afraid of a writer who's just putting words on paper. They usually aren't for quite a while because they just dismiss them. But as soon as the writer begins to shape the narrative that we're living in, and it's counter to what the larger powers see, and we're certainly seeing that today, the writer becomes central. And so the nature of the narrative we live in and the truth and the facts that come through the writer. That's where it's from. That's why when writers start getting put in prison, we know society is on a downward spiral. And so I think narrative is very important here, and the facts and the truth that shape that narrative are absolutely essential. And I know Azar feels that way.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's very true.
I'm going to ask Michelle, if you would, Michelle, to put your email address into chat, because I know a number of you want to be in touch with each other and with our guest of honor. And if I may, Michelle, I'm going to ask you to facilitate that later today or Monday morning. But through your email, you can look and be in touch with Michelle, who can help coordinate. Azar, as we're just about to wrap up, you broached the subject of Ukraine, and I would love to hear you just a little bit more on that subject. You, Joanne, just now, others have talked about how important stories are in teaching and learning, and you said, Azar, the importance of curiosity leading to empathy. I can do this in 30 seconds, and I would love your reaction, Azar. I was yesterday at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, talking to an audience of students and faculty about Ukraine. The students were mostly quiet, but they seemed very interested, and no one left early. And at the end, a young undergraduate woman came up to me and said, you know, for a lot of us, we're following it carefully, we care about it deeply, but we weren't so familiar with the details of this part of Eastern Europe and Ukraine. We're learning a lot. And so we were quiet and we're listening and we're following and we're learning. And Azar, she told me a story. She said that she saw on television news a few days ago a young woman arriving in the main train station in Berlin, in a hallway filled with refugees collecting sandwiches and bottles of water. And the reporter puts a microphone in front of this young woman, about 21 years old, and says, "Who are you? And tell us where you've come from." And the young woman says, "I'm from Ukraine. A month ago, I was a student. I had a home and friends. And now I'm in Berlin, where I have no money. I don't speak the language. I don't know anybody, and I'm homeless." And the young woman at the University of Michigan said to me, "I recognized her, that's me." I was shocked. I was overwhelmed. I was connected. Could you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about Ukraine and how we do a better job, I think we do a good job, of connecting, of being curious, of being empathetic and being helpful?
You know, I feel kind of ashamed of myself that before the war, I had not paid attention to the situation. And once the murmurs about the war became louder and louder, and Russia started its troops going to Ukraine. At the beginning, Ukraine was still a name to me with a population. I felt really bad for them, but I had not felt them until I saw those images on television, until I saw in front of my eyes how they were made homeless, they were made hopeless, and yet they carried hope with them. So the stories, I mean, the stories that they evoked made me feel much closer to them. And I found something actually in common between the Iranians and the Ukrainians in that they used music. You know, they had their musicians out in the streets singing and gathering people around them. In Iran, I get so many videos of especially the young people bursting into dancing, which is forbidden, and bursting into dancing and into music in the streets. And so now I feel a great deal of connection with the Ukrainian people. It's all about the heart. And it's all about the fact that our heart, all of us, our hearts is at the center of our life, that we all beat to the same rhythm.
Azar, thank you. If there's one final question or comment, we're going to take it. And if you want to hold your peace right now, we're going to adjourn. Anybody else? Frank, is that you?
Yeah.
Please?
So Azar, I have just one question, not on the substance, but just about your life. I find it actually very hard to get time to read books and sit down and read them. I'm just curious, you know, and there's so many distractions, you know, with screens of various sorts. How much of your week, how much time during your week do you actually spend reading a book, would you say?
I spend a lot of time. Somehow, when I was, of course, some of it I spent reading books that I needed to read. So I don't guess we count those. But for me, one fortunate thing was that I loved reading the books that I was using in my book. But when my book finished, I went on a binge. Before that, I was really not keeping up with books, and I was rereading mainly. But after that, I went on a binge. I have been starved.
Uh-huh. And how do you divide your choice in books between things that, you know, are current? So like I just ordered your book, so I'm going to read that when I'm on an airplane on Saturday. But then, you know, you also want to go back to classic books that, you know,
Yes.
were written a long time ago. I mean, what's your proportion of things that are more current and things that are, you know, kind of well-established classics in your choice of reading material?
To tell you the truth about fiction, I read the classics more still.
Mm-hmm.
I never tire of them. And it's amazing how many corners you miss, you know, and with each reading, you find a new corner, a new space that you hadn't discovered. So with fiction, classics are still there at the front of my you know, choice. Nonfiction, I keep up with more contemporary way,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and history. I read nowadays. Actually, since I wrote The Republic of Imagination, I got to reading history, American history, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I found that, you know, I used to read a lot of fiction because I thought at one point that I would be a literature scholar when I was young. And I've gone back and read some of the novels that I read back then. And I came to the conclusion that a 20-year-old just cannot read fiction because they don't have enough experience of life to really understand what the novelist is saying. And going back after several decades, you know, you kind of understand things a lot better.
Yeah, with a 20-year-old, it should be just the joy of reading. But then you discover all these places that you want to go with fiction, which take you much deeper into the work.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
everything you've done.
Very much. Well, I can tell you, thank you very much for everything you've done, Frank. I mean, thank you. Thank everyone.
So you all, we're just at time. I'm going to suggest, if you're inclined in a position to do so, that if your camera is off, switch it on just for a moment to greet people and wish everybody a good rest of the day or evening. It's what a lovely group. What a fabulous conversation. Azar, congratulations. Here's the book. I hold it up again. Read Dangerously. It's a wonderful read. Azar, thank you. This was a fabulous hour. We're really indebted to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.